This video is by Straight Goods News. SGNews.ca.
So we're facing right now the results of the cuts that the Conservatives have imposed on employment insurance. And make no mistake, what we're dealing with here is an exercise in political communication on the part of the Conservatives. They focus group this. When they stand in the House and they say that you can stand with us or stand with those who are defrauding the system, it's the exact same technique that they used with Vic Taves when you stood up and said you can either let the government into your computer without a warrant or you're standing with the pedophiles. It's a political game the Conservatives are playing here. They want people to react. They're doing things that they know go against Canadian law, sending inspectors systematically into Canadians' homes. People are not suspected of doing anything wrong, who have not broken the rules, who have in fact played by the rules. They've worked, they've paid into employment insurance, and now they're having these systematic visits on the part of government inspectors. News today, again, that if you find $2,500, you get congratulated by your employer. There are quotas. And I can tell you right now, we've had our quota of the lying of the minister responsible for this message as well. That this is the cheapest form of politics on the part of Diane Finley and Stephen Harper. It's a political game that's going to cause a lot of grief for Canadian families. Whether you're in British Columbia or Northern Ontario, in Atlantic Canada, or in the Gulf of St. Lawrence, these are people who have paid in. They live in a region that is part of Canada, part of our history, part of our geography, part of our economic reality. Any government has the obligation to take into account that reality when putting together a program. There's no such thing as a seasonal employee. There is such thing in Canada as seasonal employment. And all governments have always understood that. They've understood that it's part of what we have to protect from coast to coast to coast because it's part of Canada. Instead, we have the same old games being played by the Conservatives, but this time it's not just a political game of rhetoric in the House. This is affecting real lives. This is affecting real Canadians, and that's why it's got to stop, and they've got to start taking care of people the way governments are supposed to in this country, taking into account those regional differences.
So what can you do to stop these changes?
What the government has to do is to realize that when Liberals and Conservatives gutted the EI account to the tune of $58 billion, this was a foregone conclusion. We were going to hit this wall because employment is cyclical. When the crisis hit in 2008, the cupboard was bare. Every business, every employee had paid into that system. That's the problem. By gutting the EI account and making the fiscal room to give tax reductions to the richest corporations, and nothing to the companies in the regions that were creating jobs, they produced this result. So instead of being a government that's about creating jobs, they're a government that's about sloganeering and attacking those who are in need. That's what the Conservatives are about right now. We're going to stand up to Stephen Harper and Diane Finley and their lies, and we're going to talk to Canadians about the hole in the employment system and insurance system that's been created by the Conservatives, and we're going to stand up straight in the House and say, take care of Canadians who have paid into that system. It's not fair to let Canadian families fall into that sort of difficulty right now. People who are in need who have paid into a program. This is the cheapest type of political attack that the Conservatives have always favored. They'll go after welfare recipients. They'll say that they're bums. They attack Atlantic Canadians because of the fact that in Atlantic Canada you have a lot of seasonal employment. They say that they have a culture of defeat, that they're a bunch of losers. That's what the Conservatives think about people who live in regions of Canada that are the backbone of Canada, that define who we are. Yes, we have a lot of forestry. Yes, we have a lot of fishing. But you know what? These cuts to employment insurance don't just affect resource-producing areas. They're going to affect sessional lecturers in the universities and the cities. They're going to affect a key industry in this country, which is the entertainment industry, because very often people have a gap between different projects that they're working on. So this is going to affect people across the country. So we're going to work with Canadians from coast to coast to coast to make sure people understand what this is about. It's an exercise that, of course, was predictable with last year's budget, but now people are looking at the reality. In just a few weeks, there's going to be a black hole faced by hundreds of thousands of Canadians and their families as they have nothing left to live on. That's the reality of what Diane Finley and Stephen Harper have brought, and it's a political exercise. We're standing up today to ask them to put an end to it, to take care of people who have paid into that system, to respect it, to understand the fact that the Canadian economy has always been largely comprised of seasonal employment. It's a part of the reality, and any government has to adapt to that reality as it exists in Canada.
What about the issue of EI fraud? Do you think that is an issue, and how can it be resolved?
It is a basic question of public administration to make sure that all governments to do what's necessary to put an end to it. Because if you look at last year's figures, there's always fraud that's been found. The question is, what is going on now is against everything that we stand for as a free and democratic society. Sending the Harper Makuts into people's homes on a systematic basis without the slightest indication that something is wrong was aimed at producing exactly this result. We're heading in a few weeks to a black hole where hundreds of thousands of Canadians will be without any way to support their family. So what they're trying to do is condition public opinion, blame the victims, say that they're responsible for fraud and they're going to go into all their homes to prove it, instead of taking care of the people who paid into the system and deserve and require the help of the Canadian government. That's what this is about, nothing else.
Today, I guess yesterday we learned that a lot of senators that were contacted didn't want to give any information about their driver's licenses, income tax and all that jazz. Where do you see it going now?
We have an unelected, unaccountable, and unapologetic Senate. You're not going to find out what went on. Don't forget, we've had the Auditor General come in and look at all the systems that were in place for the House of Commons. They verified it for us, and they said, what you've got in place is able to do the job. We don't have any such assurance with regard to the Senate of Canada. But what we've also seen is Stephen Harper stood up in the House of Commons last week and gave Pamela Wallin a clean bill of health. It was interesting because he wasn't just giving testimony, he was deciding the case. He stood up, he said, this is so many days out here, this is what the money was for, everything seems on the up and up. Now that's interesting because don't forget, senators are members of the government caucus. Stephen Harper is the head of that caucus. These are his senators in the most real sense of the word. So do you really think that the senators who are now looking at those bills are going to come to a conclusion that's different from what Stephen Harper's already dictated in the House of Commons? It's the same way that a minister who interferes in a case before the courts is gone. Here, it's more than that. Forget about any objective process in the Senate. Stephen Harper's already dictated the results. What was interesting yesterday is we could hear the faint sounds of beep, beep, beep as he started to back away from Pamela. As it turns out that she might have already started to reimburse. So we're going to find out what else we can find out publicly, but we're not confident that the Senate's actually going to come clean on this one. In the future, the first thing that has to be done is to cancel this year's cuts. There's no question about that. There's no argument about that. But what has to be done long term is to rebalance a system that used to take into account different regional realities in this country, no longer does. But what the Conservatives are tipping their hand about now, they're letting people understand that this, beyond any other consideration, is an exercise in political communications. It's a game being played by the Conservatives on the backs of the needy in Canada, and that's why we're standing up and saying, these are people who have paid into the program. Stop going into their house and harassing them. Unless you have evidence that something is wrong, take care of the problems in the program. Stop attacking